you all for coming. Thank you for coming a second time around. There are several of those who were here who came when we had to cancel your talk on January 24th. We had a nice reception and conversation.
Yes, we did.
And we will have an even nicer conversation now with Gail here. We are so pleased to welcome her to AVA. I could list all of Gail's credentials, but I want to talk a little more personally because Gail has been connected with AVA for longer than I have been connected with AVA, and that's quite a long time. You were one of the first artists I think I saw on exhibit when I started, when AVA was located on the second floor behind Dartmouth Bookstore in Hanover, and you have been just the most wonderful artist to work with over the years, and it has been fascinating to follow your journey, to see how you have changed and explored and found this wonderful mixed medium of your choice, you know, these wonderful one-of-a-kind artist books and the stories you are telling. They are absolutely fascinating. Moreover, you are an artist with whom it is a pleasure to work, and that's also, that counts for something as well. So we are so happy to have you here. And there's another thing I wanted to mention. Your exhibition here is in the Elizabeth Rowland Mayer Gallery, and that also connects with the longevity of AVA, because Elizabeth, or Lily, as we know her, is a magnificent artist, and she was one of the founders of AVA when it started in 1973 in a barn in Norwich, and she has been, continuous to, like you, to experiment and to push and to create, and it is so wonderful, this combination with the two of you, you know, that you are exhibiting in the gallery that is named for her. I also then, speaking of the display here, I would like to thank our exhibition coordinator Margaret Jacobs and the marvelous intern Anna Grallert, who's picking up there, for the way that they installed the exhibition in just the most wonderful, creative and imaginative way that really resonates with your work. So thank you for coming back, or coming back. You didn't come on that Saturday. Thank you for making another visit, and we look very much forward to your talk. I noticed that in the press release it said that you have exhibited in 47 of the 50 states. It's sort of a little bit of the spirit of the Vogel connection, Herb and Dorothy, the works that are, are in all the 50 states. But I'm curious, which are the 3 states that you are not?
I never seem to remember. There's Nevada and either South or North Dakota. Where's Pierre? Is that North Dakota? South Dakota? Wherever it is, I've shown there twice, but not in the other state. And I never remember what the third one. I think it might be Mississippi.
You better get that straight.
The problem is they have no open shows. No national shows that you can enter into. If I didn't live in New Hampshire, there's no way I could have shown in New Hampshire. Everything is either a group show, or there's no national open shows.
So maybe we should change that. Well, anyway, it's just was fascinating for me to see that you have exhibited in 47
It was a goal.
Yeah, and we already look forward to your next exhibition at AVA. Thank you, Gail, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. I can't say how nice it has been to work with Linda over many years. Many would either of us want to admit to it, probably. But it's always been a real pleasure. She's always been incredibly welcoming, and I'm sure a lot of this exhibit being here is part of her judgment. And I appreciate it. And Margaret did a great job. This is not easy stuff to display. It's very difficult. Wall pieces are wonderful, you can hang them on the wall, but when you get to some of these others, they're really difficult, and I understand that, and I'm always appreciative when somebody really has a feeling for doing display that enhances the work. It's not that easy. So if anybody is on Facebook with me, you have seen me posting no slides. I've been teaching art history for the last decade, and I don't think I ever want to see a slide again. I need them for showing my work and getting into exhibitions and all that sort of thing, but I'm just tired of looking at slides. So I thought what I'd talk about a little bit is my process, and it is strictly my process. It is not artist's process. I came about my process in a very odd way, and I'm sure most artists do come about in an odd way. But I started off as a painter, so when Benta saw my original work, they were very large abstract paintings. And because I had learned as a painter, I sort of had that attitude. It's you do something to the canvas, you do something else to the canvas, and then you just do something else to the canvas. And eventually you get it to work, or not, but at least that was the process. So you don't know, you don't have an end product or an end image in mind. Okay, it's definitely working with the materials and working with what's on the canvas. So not really a way most people want to do one-of-a-kind books. You sort of should have some idea of where you're going, and to some extent I do, but some not as much as others. In some cases I sort of develop it as I go. I've been an artist long enough to trust my own voice. It either works or it doesn't. And the idea when you're young, it's like, oh, I spent a month on that and it doesn't work. When you're older, it's like, yeah, go on to something else. It doesn't bother me. You learn something from everything you do. That's true in any part of life, I'm sure. But I think in artwork, it's the same kind of thing. You learn certain things, and maybe they aren't something you could articulate, but in fact, it's something that you will use at some point as you go. So one of the things that I do and have always done is collect stuff. You would not want to walk into my studio. I visited Virajan Bogosian once, and I had to laugh when I saw his studio. It was literally a gymnasium, and literally you walked between aisles of stuff to get around. I mean, aisles of stuff piled. This was a man after my own heart. I understood this. So my studio is the same, except quite a bit smaller than a gymnasium. So I collect things that interest me, and I don't have a reason they interest me. I don't have a thought process for, oh, this would go with, oh, I will make whatever. I just collect stuff. And some of those things sit in my studio for a very long time. I've had pieces that sat in there, parts of things, for literally over a decade. One story along that line is, many years ago I was asked to participate in an exhibit that had to do with Amnesty International. And I had purchased a cap form, which just was really neat. It was very old and it came apart. Obviously it was for blocking a cap so that it had the right shape. I had that at least a decade, and when I was asked to do this exhibition involving Amnesty International, I didn't know what I was going to do, and they sent me some case studies, pick one of these to work with. And I found one that interested me. I had asked specifically for a woman's case, and of course I got 5 cases that there was a woman in one of them, but they were not really about the woman. I did choose that one. And there were 5 people, and it turned out I was sitting in my studio one day and I thought, how many pieces are in that cap form? And it turned out there were 5. So I knew what it was for. I knew what it was all about. And it was called, when I was done with it, Partial Truths, because as you read the story, you know, somebody wrote this story down. How many of the parts are missing, or how many of the parts are accurate? You don't know, right? Then it was passed to an organization that passed it to me, and then I'm passing it through my brain. How far are we from the truth? Do we know what the truth is? And my feeling is probably not. They're partial truths. They're partial truths. So each section of the cap, I wrote part of what I had been given as the story, so that even when it was all put together, you couldn't possibly read the whole thing, okay? Because they were partial truths. So, not to go into all the details, but Southern New Hampshire University bought that piece, and as it turned out, eventually gave me a job. So it was a really good piece. Let's say it worked for me. So this is a work in progress, and process is all about letting it be and working on it and thinking about it, but I never work on a single piece at a time. I always have 2 or 3. It's like the books. I always read 2 or 3 at a time. You know, there's one I read at work, there's one I read at home, you know, that kind of thing. So it just kind of percolates. And I never, because I've been an artist for a very long time, I never worry about, will I get an idea? Yeah, I'll get an idea. I will. And maybe it's not today, maybe it's not for 3 years, whatever, I will get an idea. I don't worry about it. So it's a lot easier to get ideas. This particular thing came as flat sheets, and there were 10 flat sheets, and it was put this together and get a Victorian house. Well, the flat sheet that described this was really fun. It was a photograph, and then the type that told you how to put it together was at least 2 points. There was no way you could read this. A goes to A, and B goes to B, and it's like, I can't even find A or B. So it's one of those things where you punch out all the parts and then put it together. So it sat there for 3 or 4 years, because things do in my studio. And a couple months ago, I said to my husband, I want to put that together. So he said, oh, I'll help you. And it was really funny. It took us 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, we looked at each other and said in amazement, we didn't kill each other. Wow. So this is what it ended up being. And you make aesthetic choices all along the way, okay? Whether you're thinking of them as aesthetic choices or not, you do. And I realized I didn't want to paint it. I didn't want to spray it to be sort of a wood-looking pieces. I liked it just the way it was. I don't want to do anything else to it. So when we put it together, it was like, well, I sort of want the bottom to be non-existent. I have to have the bottom to make it stable, but I didn't particularly want anything very bright. I have some of that fake brass and everything. It just, none of that really looked right. So when we got it together, because the photograph we had, you have to realize, is just the front, I was putting together one part, and I said, what's this? What do you think this is? Turned out there were 2 sets of stairs. I didn't know it had stairs, but it does have stairs. So one of the things that's fascinated me for a really long time is old houses. We live in an old house. It's over 100 years old. And I often think houses, in my own little quirky way, houses have a memory. What about the people who lived here before me? What was it like? What were their lives like? What were the rooms used for? How were the rooms decorated? You know, over 100 years, there have been a lot of changes. And it's very easy to see how clearly there have been changes, because the house next to us and the one behind it were all built exactly the same. And they do not look anything alike at this point. Not at all, because everybody's done their own thing over 100 years, 100 plus years. So I was thinking the idea of making books that go into this. And I came up with 4 different books, and 2 are finished. I finished this one yesterday. I think it's dry. This one's finished, and these 2 are just being worked on, okay? Again, because I work on several things at a time, I never get, oh, I have to have this ready. I don't enter things in exhibitions unless it's something I already have. I rarely make something that is for an exhibition. I find that that is basically the kiss of death. It's always awful. It's always awful. Now, I might have something that it's almost done and it's going to fit in that exhibit. I know what I'm going to enter this in, but it's not made for that exhibit. It just doesn't work. I have to work at my pace with whatever I have at hand and make that happen. So this one, and they're all going to go, it's going to be sort of a depository for books. So it's sort of a library within a house. And again, just with the idea of things being different over a very long period of time, things changing, things evolving. Okay? So this one is basically on the idea of the art and architecture, and the decor. And so what I did is had all kinds of papers that would describe what the wallpaper might be. And I even found a bathroom one. So as you can imagine, I have stacks of paper all over. I didn't buy anything. I didn't buy anything for this. Actually, everything was something that I had because you sort of have an aesthetic, and that's the kind of stuff you like, and that's the kind of stuff you buy, so it kind of tends to go together when you get to putting things together. Not that I never buy anything, but rarely do I need to. Okay. So this was the one I finished yesterday, and I think I've invented a new kind of binding. I'm going to look that up. This one's going to be on the creative lives and the jobs of the people who lived in the house over 100 years. So I have been collecting things. I don't usually have the covers done first. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But I was finding things that just seemed to apply to the categories I had come up with. So again, this, because I'm a creative person, surely someone else was who lived in this house, right? So somebody, a writer, I tend to write a lot of my own stories. Somebody that's a photographer, somebody that's into nature, that kind of thing. So again, I had all of these things that are going to make the covers on this particular book. Oops. This one, I do love materials and fiber, and this one's going to be on the fashions. And because very often I focus on women and their lives, I think about that. What do people wear? 100 years ago, you would have had the long skirts and, just negotiating the stairs, particularly the basement stairs, which are always much narrower in a very old house. And you think, well, what that must that have been like, let alone with the cooking and if you had children or whatever. So this is going to be all about the fashion, all right? And I have found some things that probably, not necessarily, but probably will end up, I have a bunch of old patterns. So I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to, this one is all with the idea of the paper that would be on the walls, okay, the decor, so that there's an actual thought process. And then my son installed stereo equipment in big houses, and he had a lot of architectural plans. So he said, I know you'll use these someday, Mom. And I did. So that's the idea of the paper is, again, what would be on the walls. With this, I have not decided whether they're going to be paper sheets in here or if it's going to be fabric or if I'm going to make little quilts that will fit in there that incorporate paper and fabric. I don't know yet. I have no idea. Phone me later, okay? Phone me in 6 months and I'll tell you what it ended up being. But I did have this beautiful lace that I wanted to use for the cover. And again, I do the lettering and everything by stitching it on there. Oops. And this one I finished last week. This one is on gatherings. And so the front has a dining room chair and then the back has a croissant. And the front, has the holidays that you would have had over a long period of time. So you have your Christmases keep showing up over 100 years. And I didn't in any way try to be accurate in the number of holidays or gatherings or anything. But then on the back, what I have is sort of the everyday stuff. The idea of the utensils you always use, and then the little ribbon says something about have tea, come and sit down and have tea. So this was more the everyday instead of the idea of specific holidays. Thanks for coming. Okay, so that is the way it sort of develops. It's not something that you would ever want to say, this is how to do it, because it's something that you have to sort of develop that works for you. If you're the kind of person that really needs to know what this is going to be, my system would kill you. I don't know, and that's okay. It works for me. But if you're a person that wouldn't work for, I do understand that too. Again, it's just a matter of having the things and then feeling that they're right for the work. And I don't rush it. Again, it's a sort of like, if you put that, you have to have this for a specific show, and it just turns out terrible because the process isn't being followed the way it works for me. I'm doing something that doesn't work for me. And it's the same kind of thing with this, that you really have to let it grow, let it change. Sometimes you can work on something for a long period of time and it doesn't work. It's okay. You know, you can walk away from it and then do something else. But again, I always have a lot of things in process. The other thing is when you're young, I think of this now and I have to laugh, but my big concern when I was young was, I'm going to run out of ideas. I'm going to run out of ideas. I've got ideas, but boy, not enough. You know, I'm going to run out. Exactly the opposite happens. The more you do, the more ideas you have. And it's the kind of thing that can almost be overwhelming. I'm not really good at taking a lot of notes and sketches and things like that, and I sort of have to stop myself sometimes and say, write it down. That one's a good idea, because I will forget and go on to something else. Attention span, you know. But it's the kind of thing that you know, you just have to think about it in a very different way and trust that it'll come to you. But again, it's not I'll never live long enough to do everything I have as an idea today. But I'm not going to make everything I have as an idea today either. That isn't the way it works. So this is how my process works. And yes, I have a very small studio, and yes, you can't move in it. But it is interesting. I've been reading a lot about, you know, clutter. I have something to say about clutter. And they say that creative people and their clutter, they do always know where everything is. And I find that. And it's kind of fascinating because it could be the most obscure object. And I'll think, oh, there was a rib in the head. Oh, and I can walk right to it. And maybe I saw it 5 years ago. So it's interesting the way your way of working is why it works for you and the kinds of things you do remember and the things that are important for you to incorporate into your work. And again, you can see from the range of my work that maybe I do have a rather short attention span, but I'm interested in so many things that you know, it ends up being the kind of thing that, yeah, I think it's more scattered than when I see it all together. It kind of makes a little more sense to me than when I'm working on a piece and then another piece and then another piece. So, questions? Somebody said they were going to give me a question. So. Oh, it was you.
How did you make the transition from the paintings to this? I mean, the communication seems to be different. This seems to be, in my way of thinking, more complex and having more to say even than a painting might or might not. It depends. But what was how did you transition? There's a difference.
Oh, yeah.
It seems.
Oh yeah, no, there is a difference. What had happened is I started very late in life. I didn't go to art school until I was 30. I didn't know I was an artist. Nobody told me. It was a secret. And when I went to school, which Diana remembers, I've known her that long. And what happened was I thought I was going to be a potter, which now I laugh when I think of that, because the idea that the professor I had was somebody who did sets of dinnerware. So you make that bowl, make that bowl, make that bowl. Can you think of anything more counter to my process? No. Yeah. So that was not going to happen. And I took a painting class, and that was perfect. And I discovered I loved the paint, I loved the feel of the paint, I just loved everything about it. And I started getting works that were larger and larger and larger. And I was starting to paint ones that were 3 by 4 feet in sections, so there would be like maybe 3 or 4 of those. And I was starting to get my work in exhibits around the country. You know how expensive it is to ship a painting, let alone 3 sections of a painting? I couldn't do it. I could not do it. So 2 things happened, I'm glad, at the same time. One was it was becoming unaffordable. And 2 was I painted myself out of painting. I got to the point where I had nothing to say. I really had nothing to say. I have 4 canvases at home that I would be delighted to give anybody who wants to use the canvas as long as they swear they will paint over the imagery. It is bad. And I just had nothing more to say. And I started to do the books because a friend and I, she's a perfectionist, bless her heart, we decided to take a bookmaking class, and I had decided long ago that I wanted to learn everything I could, absolutely everything I wanted to, as far as process goes, with materials, etc. Because I was always sort of teaching, whether it was kids' classes or whatever. I wasn't teaching at the university at that point. But I love process and understanding it. It wasn't that I was going to do everything, it's just I wanted to know how it worked. So we took this bookmaking class, and it was a 2-day workshop. Going in, I'm thinking, oh, she's going to come out, and it's going to be gorgeous. She does fantastic work. Very, very refined, particular, fussy, perfect work. Me, not so much, okay? So at the end of the 2 days, she had the most beautiful, perfect book you ever saw, okay? I had mountains of books. They looked like, you know, they had been cut up by a 3-year-old, but I knew how to make them because that's what I was interested in. How do you do this? Not having a product, having the knowledge, okay? She, I don't think, ever made another book, and that just, I've been one of those crazy readers from the time I was about 6 that I never can read enough. So the idea of books as an art form was like, wow. And this was in 1990, which is when books were starting to become what they are today, which is just amazing. You can get books on books that are just, you can't imagine. I mean, just breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking. I don't know how people do some of those things, but that's how I changed. And it was more putting in the content of all the stuff I'm interested in and all the subjects I'm interested in was much more appealing to me. So that's how I changed. Do you have any more questions?
So do you keep a sketchbook?
You've seen it.
I know the answer to that question, but I think other people
Upside
might be
down,
interested.
sideways, line here. It's the kind of thing, I look at someone like Frida Kahlo's sketchbook and I think, never going to happen. No one's ever going to see my so-called sketchbook because it's more about, you know, a measurement for something, or, oh, what if you did this, folded it a certain way, would that work? That kind of thing. It's never consistent. It's never the same kind of information or material. Sometimes I look back and think, oh, that was weird. Why did I do that? You know, but it's not like a normal, whatever that may mean, sketchbook. Yeah. Whatever that may mean is a big part of it because everybody's is different.
Where do you go to get all of your stuff?
I go to antique stores, and I love to go to the Garment District in New York and get ribbons and oddball things of that nature. I went to a fabric store recently with my soon-to-be co-mother-in-law or something. My son's marrying her daughter. And she's not in the least artistic, and when we were checking out, I had found this Japanese fabric that was like unbelievable, and it has kimonos printed on it, but this is really high-end fabric, okay? It's not, you know, nothing against Joanne fabric, but it's not, okay? This is made in Japan, and it's just extraordinary, and it's like I can see the pages of the book. Ooh, you know, we're checking out, and she said, oh, how much was that? I said, oh, it was $40. I thought she was going to faint. You know, a piece of fabric for $40? And it's like, no, it's a book. So I find my materials everywhere. And at this point, I can find probably 70% of anything I'm going to do right in my studio because I'm collecting for, you know, all those years. Little of this and a little of that.
This is a question that's probably not a thing you should really ask an artist, but
Well, then don't, Diana.
I know, but you know, it always amazes me whenever I see any artistic work is the motivation. On one hand, that's a big word, but what are you trying to tell something about yourself? Are you trying to teach? Are you trying to just create love steam? What is the, I don't like motivation, I don't like the word drive, I don't, the spirit, I don't know what is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I've tried to explain this to people before, that the need to create is either there or it isn't. I used to get very upset when I'd have a student or a friend who was really a good artist. I went to school with someone who was my age, and oh, could she paint? She could really paint. She's never done anything since we left school, and it used to just drive me crazy. It's like, you're a good artist, why are you not doing this? And I'm to the point now where I realize that's it. You either have the motivation or you don't have the motivation. I tell my students, you know, I can teach you how to draw. I can't make you creative. I cannot. I can encourage your creativity, but I cannot make you creative or make you have the desire. You either do or you don't. I mean, it's a sort of a horrible story, but I read one time that even in the Holocaust, some of the people were doing drawings. If they could find a piece of charcoal, they would draw. I mean, it's nothing that you can acquire, and maybe something you don't even want. You know,
But the topics, are they?
It's everything I'm interested in. Everything I'm interested in.
And so it's just out for people to share? Is it,
I don't even care if they share it, sorry. No, I mean, it's there, and yeah, I want it to be seen, but that is, I would be making it if I was doing it in the cellar, okay? I would be making it. This was my interest in because again, a lot of my work revolves around women. This was about the word crazy, how that's thrown around, and particularly crazy, with women especially. You know, oh, she's crazy. You don't hear that about men very often. Oh, he's crazy. It's always a woman. So these are sort of questioning, what does crazy mean? And one of them up there is, I mean, even to the point of it's Patsy Cline. She sang the song, Crazy. Okay, so it's not always serious stuff. Sometimes you have to throw in a little humor too. So there's Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who wrote The Yellow Wallpaper. And if you have never read The Yellow Wallpaper, put it on your list. You will never forget The Yellow Wallpaper, right? Have you read it?
Yes.
Yeah. And my students, one time I said that, has anybody read The Yellow Wallpaper? Yes. About 6 or 7. I said, do you remember it? And they're all, yeah. It's one of those stories. It's a very Victorian, but it's quite interesting. So there's everybody from Mary Todd Lincoln, you know, I mean, they wrote her off. I'm not saying she didn't have mental, I'm not saying any of these women did not have mental problems. I'm just saying that we're a little quick with that judgment. And what was the judgment about? Mary Todd Lincoln liked to shop. She would have been really bad with the shopping network. Was it the men making a judgment? She shouldn't have been doing that. Did that make her crazy? I mean, I question even what I do my work about, if you will, okay? So that's what some of it is. This is the 3 women from The Great Gatsby. My friend Laura and I have done some work with The Great Gatsby. And I was so fascinated with the idea that the writing was so clear about those characters. And I'm not talking about the movies, I'm talking the writing, the book. That each one of those women, in my mind, has a story that goes on after The Great Gatsby. So this is their story after The Great Gatsby, and that's the book I wrote on After Gatsby. It's Myrtle, and she starts off saying, you know, I never thought I'd end up this way. She's being carted off in the ambulance, if you know the story. And so each one of those is the women in that, because they were so fully drawn, so complete as women. A lot of time characters in movies or books or whatever are not complete, whether they're men or women. There's sort of a facade, but I just felt those people existed. Okay, so it's basically my interest in things which is just about everything. This I collect a lot of those photographs of women, mostly women and girls, but I have a few men. Franklin shows up quite a few because he looks like such a character. Such a character. I wanted to meet Franklin someday, maybe. So what I did with this is each of these women, I took their name, I named them, I don't know their names, and then their image, and then I would write a story about them, who they were and what they had done. And it was interesting because I was just sort of writing the stories as I went. This was what this woman looked like. I gave her name. That's what I thought her name was. Made up a story, whole cloth about them. And noticed when I finished all 16 stories that they were all very positive. There were women who maybe their husband had died and they ended up working in an office and eventually ended up owning the business. But these are all women that it's very Victorian as far as the imagery. Okay. But I noticed when I got to the end, because everybody's like, how feminism, they're always so negative. And I was like, no, it's being positive about women, not negative towards men. That's not what it's about. And so each one of these ended up being a very positive story about these women with totally fictional lives. I can only hope it worked out that well for them. But just, again, this is just one of my interests. This about prison, that's in the book 400 Books by Lark Press, 400 handmade artist books by Lark Press. Laura and I had done some work about Eastern State Penitentiary, so the photographs are the photographs I took when we went to the penitentiary, and then the text is just my thoughts on prison reform, and it's just a stream of consciousness writing. And I was very surprised they chose that particular one to be in that book, because I don't think it's as visual necessarily, because I guess I'm too involved with what the text says to think of it as strictly visual. Any other questions? You came to see the show a couple of times. You must have questions. Yes?
What was the kind of binding that you thought you invented?
Oh, I don't know. I have to look it up. I'm sure I didn't. I had a problem with the way I wanted to bind this, which was a Japanese style binding. But then when I was working on it, I thought, well, how is the lid going to open? Because I didn't do it in the traditional way. Heck, why would I do that? So after I had bound it, I was thinking, well, if I took this paper and made it so long that it came back on itself and glued it together to make it strong enough to hold the book together, would that work? Yes. It does. So I'm supposed to do a project with a friend on, I think he wants to do it on elephants, long story short. I'm thinking I have to do sort of a storyboard about how to create a book for a library, and I'm thinking of using this as a different kind of binding instead of just the traditional. That's what that was about. I'll try anything. It could work. And if it doesn't, as a friend of mine said, she's into sewing a lot. She says, you know, if you put a stitch in, you have to take a stitch out. That's a very good philosophy to have.
But Gail, with the book you have in front of you, it's really a secret because we can't touch it, we can't look in it.
Yeah.
You know the story.
I know.
But we don't.
The difficulty with books. Yeah. And it's interesting.
But that is fascinating too. You know, you imagine what is the secret inside
What's
of
inside
this.
of that, yeah. I've noticed too, people that I've done a couple books where you can't get to them. They're bound so that they cannot be opened. People always want to know what's in those. If I had them sitting out here, they'd walk right by. There's some psychology about I can't access it. Ooh, I want it, which is interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
You can access it. I could do it if I want it.
Oh yeah, there's an idea. I like that thought. You had a question, yes.
I'm sorry I'm late for this. I forgot I was going through 3 different school districts to get here at 3 o'clock. I have spent 2 or 3 visits with your work, and I really like it. And I liked the sense of mystery that I did just mention. Have you already said anything today about the about digital books and their threat to make books archaic? Do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, I do have 2 reactions to that. One is I'm old enough; it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And the reason for that, not just because I'm old, part of it. It's also the idea that those of us who grew up having a book in our hands are going to tend to go towards that. Okay, I read a newspaper every day. Newspapers aren't going to exist in 10 years, or at least not in the format of the piece of paper on your door. Okay, it's just not going to exist. I have nothing against reading it on an iPad or whatever. I've done that. When you're traveling, it's a lot easier to have that than your book kind of thing. But so part of it is just going to be an age thing because young people don't even look at books. The other thing is these are, for the most part, one of a kind. So they're a very different animal. They're if I may say so, a work of art. They're not just a book. They're in a book format, but I think, so I think they will definitely continue, particularly as that field expands. And again, amazing things are happening in the book. Answer it? More or less? All right, well, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Gail. We can walk around and have you tell us about the secrets inside each of the books. And then I hope you'll stay around. There are some refreshments in the other gallery. And Harry Bernard, who could not be here for the opening reception, will be here and give a talk at 4:30. So please just stay around. Also, we have some drawings of the schematic drawings of our plans for the new building that will be put up in the lobby, and they are beautiful. Take a look at those. We got some new drawings from Stu White today, and feel free to ask any questions. Sorry.
I was wondering how you store your work.
Not well. I was just telling my friend that I had a retrospective at University of Massachusetts in Lowell. I guess it's 2 years now?
Has it been 2 years already?
A year and a half? Something like that. And I was really good. I had labeled everything on top of the box, packed everything in boxes, did a really good job. And of course, when they packed it up, which they did, they packed it up for me, they just put things in boxes, and so nothing was in the place it was in. I unfortunately never went through to straighten that out. So when I take this home, I'm going to do that. 2 years later, I'm going to put them into plastic containers for the most part. But yeah, I have stuff in closets, I have stuff everywhere.
Plastic containers. Talk about what a plastic.
Just a plastic, like you could put shoes in it if you wanted, or you can put anything in it. But I just put on the top what's in there. Now there are things that were additions. I have books where there's 4 or 5, or in one case 10 editions. So it's one book that I made, but I have 10 editions of it. And those, I try to keep those together, that kind of thing. So I don't do things by chronology because I just don't. I don't even know where I made things sometimes. It's very difficult for people that like to have dates on pieces. It's like, I think it was 2005. I'm not good at tracking things, as you might have noticed.
It's very hard.
It is, yeah.
Packaging.
Especially when you're very prolific.
Archivally too, because mice and.
Right. A mouse got to one of the ones that's not up there. Right, Mom? And I can't figure out. I packed them away, and I told Margaret, I'm firing the cat. I mean, that's it. She's gone. But yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel better because I noticed it down in our basement.
That's why it's not.
I was so. It can't be. We don't have mice here. I
say that a lot too.